Sonic CD released in 1993 for the Sega CD, one of two hardware upgrades that released for the Genesis late into its life. The name says it all. With the new disc-based format, Sega CD games were capable of vastly superior audio, as well as fancier graphical effects than were possible with cartridges. And of course, its flagship Sonic title did not skimp out. Like its two predecessors, Sonic CD was met with critical acclaim, but since the Sega CD didn't sell as well, the game ended up falling into relative obscurity after a while. That was until the Christian Whitehead remake came out in 2011 for PC and consoles, bringing the game into the limelight once more. I mean, it was also part of Gems Collection, I guess, but who even talks about that anymore? Since then, Sonic CD has faced a lot of retrospective criticism, with many comparing it unfavorably to 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles. So what do I think? Well, you're about to find out, and let me tell you right now that this is going to be a bumpy ride. Sonic CD is a bizarre specimen of a game, and I am beyond excited to finally be talking about it on this channel. But first, let's get a couple things straight. I received a lot of negative comments on my previous video for incorrectly saying that Tails can fly in the original Genesis version of Sonic 2. This time around, I was thorough. I played Sonic CD 3 separate times for this video, once on the original Sega CD version, and twice on Sonic Origins, one playthrough being an any % run with the Japanese soundtrack, and the other being a 100% run with the US soundtrack. That sentence had 2 semicolons, and I'm not sure if that's allowed. With that said, those comments did also end up making that video the second most popular on my entire channel. Since this type of engagement is apparently really good for my analytics, I'll be deliberately hiding fake facts in every video from now on. So if I get something wrong, just know that it was definitely and totally on purpose. With that out of the way, and without further ado, this is my review of Sonic CD. Sonic CD wastes no time in flaunting the capabilities of the CD-ROM format, kicking things off with an absolutely gorgeous intro sequence. I have gotten a little tired of the community constantly obsessing over this thing, but I mean, it's not like I can blame them. It's beautifully animated, and the attention to detail with how Sonic is designed and the way he moves is incredible. This intro won't appear as clean on the original Sega CD version. In fact, it looks like something out of a Leapster game, but the animation can still be appreciated nonetheless. Anyway, Dr. Eggman is back once again, but instead of trying to take over Sonic's world, he's taken an interest in Little Planet, an extraterrestrial body that mysteriously appears for only a single month out of the year. With the newly introduced Amy Rose tagging along, and later getting kidnapped, Sonic sets out on a time-spanning adventure to save Little Planet from Eggman's rule. Sonic CD was spearheaded by Naoto Oshima, who was the art director for Sonic 1, and the guy really went all out with the visuals this time. The wonderfully surreal and vibrant landscapes of the first game return in Sonic CD with a vengeance, and since it takes place on an alien planet, the environments are more outlandish and abstract than ever before, which I love. This might just be my favorite visual style out of all the original classic Sonic games. Sonic CD also features a unique time travel mechanic, which we'll talk more about when we get to gameplay, but right now I want to focus on how it affects the appearance of every zone. When you go into the past, bad future, or good future, the level's tile set will change accordingly. The past is usually more organic, since Eggman hasn't touched it yet. The bad future shows the dystopian hellscape that the place will become if you don't stop him, and the good future shows nature reclaiming the zone. It's an awesome visual touch that helps the time travel feel more immersive than it would if it only affected gameplay. Speaking of time travel, it also affects the game's soundtracks. Yes, I said soundtracks plural. Basically, when Sonic CD was localized to North America, that version ended up getting an entirely different soundtrack than the Japanese version, I suppose to appeal more to the American market. With the release of the Christian Whitehead port and subsequently Sonic Origins, both soundtracks have since been included as a setting. The Japanese soundtrack goes for a house/techno sound, and it is 90s-tastic to the extreme. Something I've come to appreciate about the Japanese soundtrack is how it handles the tracks for each zone's various time periods. Palm Tree Panic is one of my favorites, so let's use it as an example. The present themes are essentially the bass song, and Palm Tree Panics is an exuberant tropical ordeal featuring that stock sound effect of children shouting that you probably know all too well if you've ever used iMovie. The good future themes usually put a more hopeful spin on the present theme, and in the case of Palm Tree Panic, the saxophones and children cheering in the chorus take a backseat to let the beautiful chord progression shine. Oh man, the Bad Future variants are easily my favorites in this whole soundtrack. These tracks sound like Dr. Eggman made his own diabolical remixes of the bass songs, comically, yet brilliantly, reflecting how he's twisting the environments themselves to fit his own twisted vision. Palm Tree Panic's Bad Future theme takes that yay sound effect, chops it up, and turns it into a ridiculous, yet absolutely bangin' techno beat. The past themes are interesting because instead of using CD quality streamed audio, they instead use MIDI sequences with low quality samples that remind me most of Super Nintendo music. From my understanding, this was mainly because they were running out of disk space, but Sonic Team definitely turned that lemon into lemonade. Making the past themes sound antiquated compared to the present and future tracks makes too much sense, and these songs are still well composed and pleasant to listen to, just like the rest of the music. The US soundtrack takes a bit of a different approach, leaning more to subdued and environmental sounding music. Honestly, I don't think this was a bad idea. Considering the fact that Sonic CD is more exploration based than its predecessors, the US soundtrack ironically puts into question why the Japanese version sounds like a rave party when something more ambient would have been the more obvious choice. Whichever soundtrack you think is better is ultimately up to you. Subjective opinions aside though, the US soundtrack does have one massive disadvantage to the Japanese version, and that's the fact that it's not a complete OST. The past themes still use the Japanese tracks, it's a hard-coded note sequence is harder to replace than an MP3 file, and the final boss track is just straight up missing, using the normal boss theme instead. For this reason, and for the fact that I just prefer the style overall, I tend to gravitate towards the Japanese soundtrack myself. However, please don't interpret this as a JP good US bad take, because that is most certainly not the case. I love a lot of the tracks from the US version, and I see no reason why people should get up in arms about which one is better, especially now that we have the option for either. I've been very positive about this game so far, and believe me when I say that there's still plenty to cover in that regard. However, Sonic CD is very mixed gameplay-wise, and that's mainly because of the new mechanics that it introduces. Before we get to those though, first let's talk about changes to the stuff we already know, starting with Sonic's moveset. Returning from Sonic 2 is the Spin Dash, though it behaves a little differently from how it did before. In Sonic 2, you had to spam the jump button to charge the move, but in Sonic CD, it charges over time until you release the crouch button. I'm honestly a little mixed on this change. My gut reaction would be to say that it's objectively worse than its predecessor, but having spent some time with it, I have grown to appreciate it for how satisfying it is to let loose after waiting for it to charge. I do still prefer the Sonic 2 approach, and all of the 2D games after CD seem to agree with me. That said, Sonic CD's Spin Dash did go on to become the foundation for how it works in the adventure games, and in the context of 3D, I do think it works quite well. In addition to the Spin Dash, Sonic CD also introduces a brand new move called the Super Peel Out, and honestly, it's kind of dumb. Like the Spin Dash, it charges over time once you activate it, and gives Sonic a burst of speed when you release it. The trade-off, or at least what's supposed to be the trade-off, is that it's slightly faster than the Spin Dash at the cost of not putting Sonic into ball form. However, there are two problems with the Super Peel Out that make it one of the most pointless additions to a Sonic game in my opinion. First of all, while it's supposedly faster than the Spin Dash, I honestly was second guessing that the entire time I was playing. The difference in speed was so negligible that I didn't even notice it until I looked it up. Secondly, the fact that it doesn't put Sonic into ball form is a complete non-issue because you can just roll into a ball as soon as you release it. As a consequence, the spin dash and the super peel out are so similar that they're completely interchangeable in practice. A bigger change in Sonic CD is that it reverts the way you access the special stages to how it worked in Sonic 1. Thank Cheez-Its. I much prefer the approach of having the portal appear at the end of the level instead of forcing you to tediously search it for checkpoints while trying to hold on to your rings. Though, now that I think about it, Sonic 2's special stage mechanics would probably have worked better in CDs since it focuses more on exploration, but whatever, I'll take it. As for the special stages themselves, they're probably the most impressive showcase of the Sega CD hardware in this game. They use a sort of Mode 7-esque 3D effect, and act as a glimpse into an alternate reality where we got Super Sonic Kart. Now, I haven't played all of the special stages in this game, and you'll see why later on in this video, but the several that I have played were miles better than in Sonic 2. Sonic CD's special stages are still challenging, but since you can actually see what's coming, they're a lot more fair and fun. Whenever I messed up in these stages, it never felt like it wasn't my fault. Unless there's a sudden difficulty spike on the final stage or something, I'd put these on the better end of the classic Sonic special stage spectrum. Now it's time to talk about the big new thing in Sonic CD, the crux of all of its design, for better or worse, the time travel. Scattered throughout every act are past and future signposts. Running by one of these will give Sonic a past or future badge respectfully, and if you build up enough speed with one of these, he'll travel to that point in time, get hit, run into a wall, or otherwise lose your speed, and you'll have to find another signpost. So what's the point of the time travel? Well, without spoiling too much, the ending of the game will change depending on whether or not you manage to get a good future in every zone. There are two ways to accomplish this, using time travel or completing all of the special stages to collect the time stones. For the time being though, let's just focus on time travel. To get a good future in an act, you have to warp to the past, destroy the robot generator, then finish the level as normal. Since you only need to go to the past, the future posts act more as obstacles than as tools, though if you have some time to kill after destroying the generator, you could try to use it to see the good future that you've created. In theory, this is a pretty solid gameplay loop. When you're trying to go to the past, you're looking for an optimal place to build up and maintain speed. But if you accidentally run into a future post, you suddenly have to do the opposite. The future badge is a brilliant stress motivator because while you're still looking for a place where you can build up enough speed, it's now with the intent of canceling it out at the last second to get rid of the badge. However, it's also very possible that this mechanic could get tedious. If the level design is too speed oriented, the player could end up constantly going back and forth through time, having to search for another past signpost every time. On the other hand though, if the level design is too compact, it could lose the unique appeal that classic Sonic levels have. With that in mind then, let's see how well Sonic CD's levels complement this mechanic. Sonic's first outing on the Genesis had quite varied level design, sometimes focusing on speed, while other times focusing on exploration and platforming. Sonic 2, for the most part, zeroed in on constantly moving the player forward, with precision platforming mainly being used to briefly break up the pace before launching Sonic through another dizzying array of loop-de-loops. Sonic CD leans more into the explorative side, but unlike Sonic 1, it utilizes the pinball physics a lot more. In that sense, speed is still a core focus, but instead of being about getting to the end as quickly as possible, it's instead used as a tool to reach places you wouldn't be able to otherwise. That's not to say you can't speed through these zones though. Just like its predecessors, Sonic CD can be beaten from start to finish without ever touching the time travel or special stages. This can be fleetingly fun, but playing the game this way is ultimately unfulfilling, and that's because these levels were designed first and foremost with exploration in mind. There's a lot of verticality in these zones that you're just not going to engage with if you're not searching for those generators. But how fun is it to engage with in the first place? Well, in the early levels, Sonic CD absolutely nails its game loop. As was the case with 1 and 2, there is a learning curve involved, but once the time travel system clicks with you, searching every nook and cranny of these massive zones for generators becomes surprisingly addicting. Like I mentioned before, the future posts add a layer of looming stress that you'd think would be a detriment, but in the case of these zones, it only makes the gameplay loop all the more engaging. Unfortunately though, that's not the case for the later zones, particularly Wacky Workbench and Metallic Madness. boss. A lot of levels in this game are designed to bounce you around a lot to build up speed, but Wacky Workbench takes this idea way too far, with these floor panels that launch you up into the sky, making the lower areas absolutely miserable to search. As for Metallic Madness, its main issue is how its different areas are segmented by these tubes, making it needlessly confusing. And as an extra middle finger, there are spikes all over the place. Levels like these not only make searching for generators miserable, they're also the main reason why going the special stage route is not my preferred method of 100%ing the game. Good luck trying to hang onto your rings when the levels are constantly bouncing you around like this. With all of this said, I do want to make it clear that Sonic CD does have its fair share of solid levels. Overall, I'd say the ratio of fun is higher than the first game, at least once you get over the steep learning curve. Zones like Palm Tree Panic, Collision Chaos, and Quartz Quadrant are great showcases of interesting gameplay experiences that the time travel can provide. Meanwhile, zones like Wacky Workbench and Metallic Madness are straight up tedious to explore, and end up testing your patience more than they test your skills. With the main levels covered, let's finally talk about the bosses. Sonic 1 and 2's bosses made use of its simple design philosophy. There's no limit to how many times you can hit the boss while it's vulnerable, only the amount of time that it is. The reason this works so well is that the player's skill is what dictates the pace of the fight, rather than scripted attack cycles. Does Sonic CD follow up its predecessors with equally great boss design? No. Sonic CD's bosses are, both literally and metaphorically, they hardly have any hit points, so the few that do follow the classic philosophy are complete pushovers. Because of this, CD's bosses tend to ignore this design approach, focusing instead on gimmicks. Some of these are creative, such as the pinball table in Collision Chaos or the conveyor belt in Quartz Quadrant, but even the best of these ideas are often tedious in practice. The undisputed high point of the game's bosses is Metal Sonic, because instead of fighting him, you're racing him. This is a really cool moment, but even this isn't saved from Sonic CD's strange design choices. Why can Metal hit me and slow me down, but I can't do the same to him? And how did Metallic Madness's obsession with spikes spread into Stardust Speedway? Unfortunately, while many of them are creative in concept, the bosses in Sonic CD ultimately fall short of the ones in Sonic 1 and 2. With that in mind, let's move on to the final boss. Spoiler alert, skip here if you don't want to see it. The final boss is okay, I guess. According to this random guide I found on YouTube, you're supposed to sit in a corner for like 5 hours while waiting for an opening, but since Sonic CD is merciful enough to give you rings, it's pretty easy to just tank your way through it and get it over with. After Eggman is defeated, Sonic escapes with Amy as the Mad Doctor's base crumbles. If you get the bad ending, Eggman supposedly escapes with the Time Stones, though not sure if he's gonna be doing anything with them anytime soon. If you get the good ending, Little Planet is not only freed from its shackles, it also disappears, presumably returning to its rightful place in the cosmos until it reappears next year. With that, Sonic speeds off, and the credits roll. Sonic CD is a bizarre hodgepodge of a game that often feels at odds with itself, but even so, I can't help but love it. There's plenty of things I would change about this game: the pointless super peel-out move, the underwhelming any % experience, and especially the awful later levels that turn the time travel from a satisfying mechanic to a frustrating one. But Sonic CD has so much going for it too. The visuals are delightfully vibrant and surreal, the soundtrack is amazing regardless of region, and the time travel and focus on exploration were incredible ideas that I'd love to see revisited someday. Sonic CD is far from the best classic Sonic game, but even with all of its flaws, it's still absolutely worth experiencing. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my other Sonic content and subscribe for more video game content just like this. You can also become a member for just $1 per month to get your name in the credits, exclusive emojis, and a special channel in my Discord server. Next time, we'll be talking about Sonic 3 and Knuckles, so stay tuned, thanks for watching, and as always, enjoy life.